Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. This is a recording made by Thomas Edison himself. Keep in mind, this was back in 1912, I think, when Teddy Roosevelt, 1913, he was running on the Bull Moose, at the Progressive Boys Club. He was running the Bull Moose Party for president. He had been president of the United States, a Republican. And here is Teddy Roosevelt rolling out the living wage.
The principles for which we stand are the principles of fair play and a square deal for every man and every woman in the United States. A square deal politically, a square deal in matters social and industrial. I wish to see you boys.
Yeah, this is not the clip. He starts out by saying, I stand for a living wage. In fact, I think that's the name of the clip. I stand for, and living wage is it varies from state to state, local, but it's enough to raise a family. It's enough to put your kids through school. It's enough to, I've got it on my computer, but I don't have a player on this computer right now. And okay, just because I gave it such a big pitch. By the way, during the break, Chris, who does our video, Chris, I hope you don't mind my attributing your comments to you. Is it all right? I like to give credit where credit is due, at least occasionally. Chris was like, "Oh yeah, so I should sign up and go to get shot at in order to get the skill set so I can get a decent job. How's that some kind of deal?" I mean, those weren't your exact words, but it was the sentiment. Did I capture the sentiment well? Yeah. It's a great argument. Great argument, Chris. Thank you. I missed that one. But I think, and somebody on Twitter said, and over in the chat room as well, basically Glenn has to choose. Do you want a living wage or do you want welfare? Because if you have neither, you're probably going to have a revolt. You're certainly going to have a country that doesn't work. You're going to have higher crime rates. You're going to have all kinds of social problems that come along with stark, extreme, hunger-based poverty, which was stalking America in 1912, 1913, or, around the turn of the century. We had, you had the emerging union movement. It was the tail end of the Gilded Age, where massive wealth had been accumulated by the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and the Mellons, but not by the average working person. The average working person was, by and large, getting screwed. And so Teddy Roosevelt, the Republican Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, the former Republican president of the United States, came out and said, I stand for a living wage. Wages in the industrial sector. Now, this assumes an industrial economy, I suppose, but I think it should be able to apply to anything. And this is the point. This is where Franklin Roosevelt expanded beyond that and said, basically all work has dignity. All work has value. And if you don't have a job, and if capitalism isn't going to provide you with a job, and it certainly wasn't in the 1930s, then the government will. We will be the employer of last resort. And that was the WPA and the CCC and all the other cool stuff that they did. But this is the recording that Thomas Edison made of Teddy Roosevelt laying out the concept of a living wage. Here it is.
We stand for a living wage. Wages are subnormal if they fail to provide a living for those who devote their time and energy to industrial occupation. The monetary equivalent of a living wage varies according to local conditions.
Okay, pause that. The value of, and it's hard to understand what he's saying here. So I'm gonna Troy, if you can follow along with me, I'm just going to break this into pieces here. He says the value of a living wage varies from place to place according to monetary conditions. In other words, it's the cost of living, right? So Teddy Roosevelt was actually in favor of a national standard, but not, let's not set it too high, all right? Okay. So then but what should that living wage be? Here he starts to lay it out. Here's the first piece.
But must include enough to secure the elements of a normal standard of living.
Normal standard of living. Yeah, what is a normal standard of living, Teddy? Here he is.
A standard high enough to make morality possible, to provide for education and recreation.
Okay, stop right there. Enough to make morality possible. In other words, you don't have to steal to live. because it was actually a problem in 1912 of people stealing to live, right? And enough to pay for your children's education. Continue.
Care for immature members of the family.
Raise
to
your
maintain
children.
the family during periods of sickness. And to permit a reasonable saving for old age.
Okay, and to care for your children and to pay for your health care, basically, to care for the family during periods of sickness, and to set aside enough to prepare for old age. Now, I would say in the United States right now, for a family of four, that, you know, that would probably be at least 40 grand. I mean, I'm not, you know, it's like, where should maybe 30? I don't know. I don't know. How much is that? I guess like Teddy Roosevelt said, it's going to vary. If you're living in some parts of this country, you can live, you know, probably fairly well on that, and you try to live in New York City on less than, you know, 50 or 60,000 a year. It's a challenge, but it's like, but at least a you know, $15 an hour, I mean, is a starting point. Like I said, the minimum wage in 1968 in adjusted dollars to today would be about $18 an hour. If we were to adjust the minimum wage for productivity, it would be $24 an hour. So what has happened is productivity has increased over the last 30 years since Reagan put the brakes on the American middle class, basically. Productivity has continued to increase, individual worker productivity, but individual worker wages haven't gone up. So where has the extra money from that productivity gone? It's gone to the top 0.1%. All of it. $7.5 trillion of it since Ronald Reagan became president. Gone to the top 1%. $7,000 billion. It's pretty remarkable.